we go. Right. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have Michael Bracken with us today, and he is the author of more than 1,300 short stories. I know, I can't even imagine. He is an Edgar and Shamus Award nominee and 3-time Derringer Award winner. His crime fiction has appeared in the Best American Mystery Stories, the Best Mystery Stories of the Year, and many other publications, I bet. Additionally, Bracken is the editor or co-editor of 36 anthologies, including Black Hat Weekly, right?
That's a magazine.
And this includes a Derringer Award winner and 3 Anthony Award finalists. He is a recipient of the Short Mystery Fiction Society's Golden Derringer for Lifetime Achievement. Wow. And in 2024, he was inducted into the Texas Institute of Letters for his contributions to Texas literature. Michael, thank you very much for being with us today. So,
thank you.
Welcome.
We're going to talk about what makes a good short story. So I'm going to talk about 6 elements of a good short story. Then we're going to talk, I believe it's 9 ways that you can, that will help you write a good short story. And depending on time, I brought some samples of story openings we can discuss. Now, unfortunately, the handouts aren't translating too well through the internet, but just play along with us if you can. One of the first elements to a good short story is that it captures the reader's attention immediately and establishes the stakes. So one of the ways you can do this is you start in the middle of the action. For example, I shot Randisi twice and he still kept coming. That's right in the middle of the action. You could establish the setting. Wind howled through the trees, branches scratched at the windows, and Cheryl and I huddled against the back wall of the one-room mountain cabin, watching the door for the 3rd night in a row. Or you can pose a question. This is less common. We were 12. How could we ever understand the consequences of our actions that morning? So these are 3 ways that you can command attention. But next, you have to establish the stakes. And that's not always a 1-sentence, 2-sentence thing, but taking these 3 possible openings that we hope grab the reader's attention, we'll give that same opening and then another sentence or so that establishes the stakes in the story. The stakes are the consequences. What will happen if, or what will happen if not? So, I shot Randisi twice and still he kept coming. I was the last U.S. Marshal standing between the contract killer and the young woman scheduled to testify the next morning in the government's case against Brandon Baby Killer Benson. Now you know the stakes. If this guy doesn't succeed, the woman he's protecting is going to die. Very clearly, you know what's going to happen. The next one, we're establishing the setting. Wind howled through the trees, branches scratched at the windows, and Cheryl and I huddled against the back wall of the one-room mountain cabin, watching the door for the 3rd night in a row. We didn't know who or what stalked the woods, but it only came out at night, and we were all that remained of the 6 women who had arrived the previous week for our annual writers' retreat. Personally, I think it's an editor out there, but we were 12. How could we ever understand the consequences of our actions that morning? 20 years later, what the 3 of us had done to Marshall Wilson came back to haunt us, leaving Jeremy in a coffin, Grant in a wheelchair, and me lying to my wife about my involvement in that day's events. So, obviously your character is worried. He's lying about what really happened, and his 2 friends who were involved in it have suffered serious consequences. He's anticipating that. 1A, which is like a subset of capturing the reader's attention, the opening must be genre appropriate and consistent with the story that follows. You don't want a slam bang fast action fist fight car chase and then morph into a cozy. The same thing, you don't want your cat strolling through the scene and pilfering kibbles, and then suddenly it's a slam bang slugfest. So what's an appropriate opening that grabs the reader is going to vary a bit based on genre. So, for example, I introduced Redmond's face to the brick wall and left him unconscious when I walked out of the alley. I just stepped onto the sidewalk when I felt the barrel of a revolver press against the base of my skull. A gravelly voice I didn't recognize said, "Get in the car." We're looking at something hard-boiled, probably fast-paced. And some consequences there. What happens if you don't get in the car? Right. Okay. But compare that to this. Shakespeare, the bookstore's feisty Siamese cat, pushed a row of recent acquisitions off the shelf behind the cash register. As Becky, the Becky of Becky's book bin, stooped to retrieve them, she discovered a handwritten note that had slipped from between the pages of one of the romance novels. She unfolded the lavender paper and found, written on it in flowing cursive, "My husband is trying to kill me." Now, that could go pure cozy, that could go woman in jeopardy, that could go a couple of different ways, but it's clearly not the same as that first example. These two would not be in the same story if the story is written well. A good short story has a singular purpose. It's about one thing. We'll discuss that a little bit more, but essentially, everything in the story should lead the reader along a similar path to a singular path to a singular conclusion. For example, a private eye is hired to find a missing Dalmatian. Everything in the story aids her search or impedes her search. The ending, whether happy or not, is the logical conclusion of those activities. It's very simplistic, but it's one thing. It's about searching for this Dalmatian. It has an identifiable plot. At its core, a plot contains three things: a beginning, a middle, and an end. That seems obvious, but there are a lot of short stories that aren't good that are missing one or all of those elements. So you can usually, if you can't compress your plot into 3 sentences, we're really reducing down. We're not covering every single thing that happens in your story. A very simplistic one might be, Sally's diamond engagement ring is stolen. She investigates by interviewing all 3 suspects. She identifies and confronts the thief. Hopefully the story itself is much more complex than that, but those are the 3 key elements. A more detailed 3 sentences. Dave, deep into a bookie for gambling debts, steals money from his employer. His employer discovers the theft and gives Dave a choice: kill my cheating wife or report your theft to the police. Dave discovers that his employer's wife is sexually involved with his bookie and kills the wife in a way that implicates both his boss and the bookie. So it's a more complicated, but it's still 3 sentences. It's the setup, it's the middle, and it's the end. Very similar to a lot of jokes. You set up, well, jokes have beginning and end often. Beginning, setup, and punchline. Sometimes there's a middle. But a story, a good story, will operate on multiple levels. So it has a singular purpose and an identifiable plot. But many beginning writers believe the plot is the one thing that the story is about, completely missing the possibility or probability that the plot is simply the framework. For example, a story might be about the planning, execution, and aftermath of a robbery committed by a father and son, which could probably make a pretty good bit of crime fiction. But the one thing hidden beneath it all might be a story about the evolving relationship between the father and son as they grow older. So don't look at the plot necessarily as the one thing. The plot is just what carries the one thing, which helps you get to the one thing. Now, really experienced writers who've been doing it a long time can sometimes write a short story about 2 things, but it's difficult and it's not something you usually accomplish in your first few hundred stories. Number 5 is a good short story has an identifiable theme. Now, it's not a sermon, so you don't sit down and say, I'm going to write a sermon about a story about this that proves this point. That's probably not what you're going to go for. But it's identifiable, and it may be simple. And a lot of mystery fiction is good triumphs over evil. That's a legitimate theme. Love conquers all. A lot of romance stories have that theme. Could be there's a sucker born every minute. We're doing P.T. Barnum's story. It could be noir. Life sucks and then you die. So, but it's still a theme in your story. If you read the story, this is what you draw from it, or what you potentially draw from it. And as the writer, need to be aware. Now, at the end, reread your story. So, what is the reader going to get out of it? What's the theme? Now, what you may find if you've written a really good story, the theme might be the antithesis of what you personally believe, because you've written a really good story and you've made it convincing. Try to do this without getting too political. Okay. Well, no. Okay. Let's take a very divisive subject as abortion, and you write a story and you're dead set against it. Your personal and moral beliefs say this is wrong, any circumstances. But you might write a short story, and at the end of it, you go, my God, that was the only legitimate choice for that character. And you go, those aren't my beliefs. It's the character's beliefs. It's the character situation. So sometimes you will find yourself writing a story, a good story, where the theme is the antithesis of your own personal beliefs. And then you have to decide what you're going to do. You know, it's a great story. Do you want it published, or because it violates your own personal beliefs, you go, this one's going in the drawer for a while. Okay. And that's legitimate, but understand what your theme is. A story, good story, should end with an impact. The reader should have a visceral reaction to your story. They should shudder, they should cry, they should laugh, they should have a reaction to it. Now, a lot of enjoyable stories don't do that. You go, oh, this is a cool clue that the writer came up with, and he built it in here, and he's got the clue here and the clue there, and it was cool how the detective solved the crime. Perfectly legitimate, wonderful, entertaining story. But a good story is going to leave the reader with an impact. It's a story that you're going to think about a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. You think, man, I remember reading, and I remember the impact on me. And that's going to likely be a good story. And then, since we're dealing mostly with mystery and crime, a lot of writers think there has to be a twist. There does not have to be a twist. The ending needs to be inevitable, whether there's a twist or not. For example, and we'll use a couple of movie examples, The Sixth Sense or The Usual Suspects. Those are not twist endings. Every clue that gets you to the end is in if you pay attention. So there's no twist. There should not be a surprise if you have paid attention all the way through. And that's what a good short story does. You go, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. And then you look back and go, well, there's the clue and this should have led me, and that should have led, oh, and I put those together. It's inevitable. This was the only way it could end. Or this was maybe not the only way it could end, but it's a logical way to end based on what's written here. So those are some overriding things to look at of what makes a good short story. Now, a great short story does all of these things to the nth degree. And if any of us ever write a great short story, we're all going to be impressed. I'm happy if I write a good story. And there are many publishable stories that don't necessarily even do all of these well, but they do enough of them that they compensate for the couple of places where they may be a little weak. So, you know, there's publishable, there's good, and there's great. So we're going to move on to 9 tips on how to actually write a good short story. And you are welcome to chime in with questions at any point if something's not clear or you want a better example or a different example. Okay. A good short story the writer will establish a narrative voice. Nathan Bransford defines it as the non-dialogue storytelling that communicates description, action, thought process, and context to the reader in a manner that's infused with the anchoring point of view's personality. That's the word choices, the sentence structure, the paragraph structure. And over time, a writer may develop a narrative voice such that readers can identify her work without seeing the byline. Some writers are able to create narrative voices specific to a story. Some, their narrative voice carries through all their stories. For example, read some Agatha Christie short stories. Read some Dashiell Hammett short stories. These are older writers. Read Ashley Ruth M. Bernier or S.A. Cosby. Read short stories from all those 4 writers. And you will go, none of those writers will ever write like the other writers. And Cosby is usually identifiable just without seeing his byline. Ashley Ruth is definitely identifiable without seeing her byline. I've judged some competitions or some things that she's been in that they come with no identification, no author identification. I go, that's Ashley Ruth. She's that clear in her voice, and she has a novel coming out in a couple of months. So, and there are probably other writers that you read regularly, and you go, I read this writer because maybe it's Mick Herron, maybe it's somebody name a cozy writer that I don't read. But yeah, there are writers that you read regularly, and you read them because of that voice, the unique way that they structure the language. And you go, I like the way they think and how they describe things. Then also know when to show and when to tell. So often your advice always says, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. That's not really true. If you showed everything, your short story would be Game of Thrones. Because you have to find the moments when you know the difference. So here's an example. Jerry was a nervous little man. Or Jerry's leg shook, his eyes darted back and forth, and he chewed on the fingernail of his left pinky finger. You don't have to say he's nervous. That's what somebody nervous is going to do, probably. If it means something other than he's nervous, you got to explain that better. So my second example doesn't even prove the point, so I won't read that one. I'm going, yeah, that didn't work, did it? So think about that. You don't necessarily, for example, this applies, for example, to backstory. Some writers like to give the villain's entire life history, why they're a villain. Well, sometimes you don't need to know everything. You just need to know this is a villain, he's bad, and he's doing bad things. So you don't have to tell all about his history and all the bad things that happened to him as a kid and a teenager and a young adult. And when he got his first job, he's bad. He's killing people. I mean, that's pretty bad right there. So you have to find that balance. And especially in a short story, you don't have a lot of room to go into a lot of showing, but you need to show some. You also have to know when to stop and just tell something. Number 3 is avoid detours. And this is something I see in a lot of beginning writers. Avoid spending 3 paragraphs describing a waitress who only appears in a single scene and has no bearing on the outcome of the plot. I've seen writers who do that. They're writing their stories and they're stopping to describe a character who's only there for one little fraction of a scene, but it's 3 or 4 paragraphs, how tall they are, what they look like, where they went to school, blah, 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 blah. They never show up again and have no impact on anything that happens. Don't go off on the detour. Avoid multi-paragraph diatribes about people who leave their shopping carts in the middle of grocery store aisles. If it has no bearing on plot, I may write that story. We all have our complaints. Related to that, not every character needs a name. And I've seen some writers who give every single character gets a name, and it gets horribly confusing. So for example, the waitress took our order. That's all she's there for, or waitress, so it would be a she. That's all she's there for. She comes to the table, interrupts them talking, takes their order, walks away. Boom, doesn't need a name. Or our waitress, a skinny blonde named Ethel, who carried a Glock in a black leather holster strapped to her hip, took our order. Okay, well, Ethel better pull that Glock at some point in the story. She's got to come back. If you're going to just give her that much description, she's important to the story. Make sure she stays important to the story. Who does she shoot? Why does she shoot them? What does she do if she doesn't like the tip you left? So be conscious of that. So avoid the detours, whether it's just description or whether it's giving information about characters who are not ultimately important to the story in any way. Another important thing to do, and this has various examples, is be precise. What happens is choose good words versus strings of words necessarily. So for example, you'll see he walked slowly across the room. Okay, maybe he did. But what about he strolled across the room? Totally different. Takes fewer words and it's a more evocative image. He sashayed across the room. He strolled across the room. He crawled across the room, whatever. Or she walked quickly toward me. Doesn't say much. She hurried toward me. She rushed toward me. She ran toward me. All of those are ways of moving quickly, but they invoke a different feeling or a different visual of what she's doing. My personal bugaboo is the word got. The word got can almost always be replaced by a better phrase or word. He got up versus he stood. He got to his feet. Does that mean he stood, or that he rolled out of bed, crawled across the floor, and got his prosthetic feet next to the chair? What does got mean? Usually it doesn't mean anything. It's unclear. So be specific, be precise. Another word that's I don't know why, but I've seen a rush of stories. It's tapered off, but like into last year, beginning of this year, I've seen a rush of stories where writers use the word just. His place was just around the corner. Well, how about his place was around the corner and 2 doors down? Be specific. It was just about time to leave, or it was time to leave. Similarly, specificity, numeric specificity. A few minutes past 10 versus at 10:03. The reader, a few minutes past 10, was it 2 after, 5 after? What is that? But at 10:03, you know precisely what time it is that this event's going to happen. And another thing I see far too often, and again, it's a number problem. There were 3 or 4 tables inside the restaurant. Can your character not count? It's not that hard. You know, if there's more than a dozen, you say there were more than a dozen, you know. So you maybe don't need to say there were exactly 12 or exactly 13. It comes a point where counting gets difficult inside a story. But if you ever find yourself, there were this or that many somethings, pick one. She was 12 or 13. Oh, what was she? Just pick one. Now, the reader, you may not, my character doesn't know. He's never met this girl before in his life. You can fudge a little bit. She's 13. She's 12. She's 23. She's whatever. So be specific, be precise. Don't fudge around. Well, it was kind of, sort of, you know, maybe around then it was just. Being precise is really important. And good stories are always precise. Precise images, precise words. And then dialogue tags. Use them judiciously. And a lot of writers will tell you, oh, he said, she said is invisible. It's not invisible. It has an impact on the rhythm of a sentence. So if anybody's old enough to remember Henny Youngman, this was funny 30, 40 years ago. It's no longer really funny, but it's the only good joke that works for this. So if you write, take my wife, please, he said, falls flat. He said, take my wife, please. A little bit better because the punchline's not stepped on by the words he said. But could be, take my wife, he said, please. Then you've got the pause where the pause needs to be inside that joke. Because when Henny Youngman says it, there's an actual pause. Take my wife, please. And that's what makes it funny. If you just rush through it, it's not funny. It may not, today it may not be funny anyhow, but it was back then, I swear, when I was this tall, that was a funny joke.
It's a whole book about
Well,
see, shoots and ladders.
yeah.
Shoots and leaves.
And leaves.
Shoots and ladders. That'd be good. You can follow
I
up.
like that, yeah. You choke on the little pieces though. Sometimes no dialogue tag is needed. Okay, going back to one of the earlier example. Cheryl huddled against the wall as the door rattled a second time. Are you sure we're safe? You know, you don't have a dialogue tag, but you know Cheryl says it. Going back to one of the other examples. It wasn't my idea. I picked at the paper napkin without looking at my wife. It was Jeremy's, and he and Grant did it. I just what? My wife demanded. I swallowed hard. I just watched. So the narrator, there's no dialogue tag for the narrator, but you know when the narrator is speaking. So be aware of that with your dialogue tags. So I've edited a couple of stories recently where every time a character speaks, he said, she said, John said, Bill said, Steve said. If you get rid of all the saids, you like cut a third of the story out. You know, it's back to being precise and being definite. Sometimes if you write really incredible dialogue, and not many of us can do this, you can write dialogue that's so crisp and clear that you don't even need the non-dialogue tags that I did this, John picked up there, whatever, because they speak in such different ways. You go, that is how Joan speaks throughout the story. That is how Bill speaks throughout this story. And whatever way they speak, it may be. So like, we went down to, well, you were there, versus the character is very precise and very short sentences. I shot him, he died, so what? Utilize the rule of three. This is important. Doesn't get talked about a lot. But if something is important in a story, it needs to be mentioned 3 times. Establish the setup of the thing. Mention it later, so it sort of embeds in the reader's mind. And then at the end, when it's used, it becomes important. And that's tied into, I just did these out of order, so this doesn't make so much sense. Beware of Chekhov's law, the shotgun over the mantle. Now this one gets talked about. If you've taken the time to establish there's a shotgun over the mantle in the first scene, somebody better shoot that thing before the end of the story. Vice versa, and this is even more common. If someone whips out a revolver in the last scene, somewhere you'd better establish that this character is carrying a revolver, so the reader doesn't go, where did that come from? And then here's how that ties in with the rule of 3. Scene 1, the shotgun over the mantle is mentioned, and that grandfather always kept it loaded. It's going to be important if he pulls it off the mantle and fires it. Scene 4, perhaps, the protagonist mentions that using the shotgun as a teenager when he went hunting with his grandfather. So we've established he knows how to use it. And then the climax, he grabs the shotgun and shoots the villain. The rule of 3. Establish it's there, establish the character's familiarity with it or knowledge of it, and then it gets used. Then you need to be aware, number 8, be aware of stereotypes and cliched characterizations. Now, I had a whole bunch of stereotypes I could list on. No matter which one I pick, I'm going to insult somebody. So if you just think of any ethnic group, religious group, anybody, any A&M graduate, you can think of stereotypes. There are jokes about it, but they're stereotypes. If you're writing a story about characters who are not like you, stop and think, am I giving the character this characterization because I think all people like this do this or have this or are able to do this or have this skill or don't have this skill? And take some time to figure out why you're doing that. What is it? Is it critical to the story you're telling that this character has a stereotypical skill? That's tough. It's tough to pull off and do successfully because you're gonna have some reader somewhere and goes, why? Why'd you do this? Why did you do this? So think very hard about writing characters who are not like you. Now, there are some writers today that says you should never write about a character like you, but we're writers, we create fiction, we make stuff up. That's what we do. So don't be afraid to create characters who aren't like you. Be cognizant of them and create them as well-rounded people who just, I won't say they just happen to be of that group, but I have found it better to start from the inside out. Instead of saying all this kind of people, everybody like this does this. Instead think, what are they afraid of? Everybody has a fear. So you can describe it. We may fear different things, but we know what fear is, probably. We know what love is. We know what it's. Start from the inside. What does this character fear? What does this character love? Why is somebody email? I should turn that off. Go away. Be aware of that. And then be aware of cliched characterizations. Not just the stereotypes, but the cliches. If you watch old Western, black and white Westerns, the bad guys always wore black hats and the good guys wore white hats. You could tell them apart. Look at the hat. Okay. The gray hats were always a problem. And I don't really remember too many of those. If you watch a lot of movies, you'll see that only the bad guys kick dogs. So the moment a character kicks a dog, you go, bad guy. Don't make it that obvious. Have them kick a cat or, you know, whatever. Do something. Bad choice. Sorry, there's cat lovers in here. We had cats.
Not give his cat a treat.
Yeah, do something a little less obvious.
That's mean.
Yeah, mean but not cruel. And you go, "Eh." And remember that good people sometimes do bad things and bad people sometimes do good things. I don't advocate kicking dogs, but what if the good guy kicks a dog? How do they redeem themselves in the eyes of the reader? The dog's Cujo. Well, yeah, okay. Okay, it's okay to kick that dog. Maybe. And then the other thing, I don't know if you've been paying attention in movies, bad guys never use Apple products.
Never use what?
Apple products, Macintoshes. Have you noticed?
I haven't been. I
Pay
will now.
attention. If somebody uses a Macintosh, that's a good guy.
Well, there can be religious differences.
Yeah, yes.
And the reason is because Apple says you can't use our products in your movie if bad guys have them.
Oh,
You cannot use our products for bad.
Huh.
So pay attention. Well,
Stories.
yeah. But, you know, but those are things where if you pay attention, there are certain elements that tell readers things if they're paying attention.
Mhm.
Black hats versus white hats. Who kicks dogs and doesn't kick dogs?
Hmm.
Who uses Apple products and doesn't use Apple products? Now, in a story, they can't really tell you. But when movies are licensing product use, Apple says, that guy doesn't blow up the world with our products.
Hmm.
Another very important thing is to get your facts right. If you're writing about a real place or a real thing, ensure that the details are correct, or at least not demonstrably wrong. Because this is fiction, sometimes you have to fudge a little bit. But for example, how many bullets does that revolver or pistol hold? If you watch some old movies, you see a guy with a 6-shooter shooting 7-8 times before he reloads. They're going, it's a magical. Yeah, I didn't realize it's a magical movie. So take the time. If you're going to have a pistol or a revolver and a character has it, take some time to look at how many bullets does it hold before it has to be reloaded. If you're in writing about Austin and you pick a road that's really here, like Bee Cave Road, does it run east-west or north-south? Which is some weird angle. Are the highways east-west, north-south? Which direction do roads run? I just edited a story recently where they used a real town and put the police station next to a convention center. I looked at the map, they're like 2.5 miles apart.
Hmm.
Okay, so if you're using a real place, real item, real thing, try to get it factually correct. Because the worst thing you can, not the worst thing, getting rejected is the worst thing, but the second worst thing is if a reader reads your story and you get a note that says, you know, World War II didn't happen in 1901, you know, whatever. So just be very cautious of that. And for fun, watch the courtroom scene in My Cousin Vinny where Marissa Tomei's character eviscerates the prosecution's case with car facts. She uses facts and totally destroys the prosecution. So now, honestly, I don't know if those are facts, but by God, she convinced me, you know. I've never taken the time. Are those really true, honest to God descriptions of those vehicles? But it was convincing enough to convince me.
Mhm.
So look for things like that in your story. So if it's a disease, what are the symptoms of the disease? Is it curable or not curable? How is it curable? If somebody gets shot, next month's presentation, if somebody gets shot in the head, how long are they last through the rest of the scene? Wow, he was only shot once, so he lasted another 3 hours.
Hmm.
Look at him, you know. And related to that, why does everybody get shot in the shoulder? And they're still able to use, I mean, come on, you get shot in the shoulder. You're not using that shoulder for a while. You could be dead. But if you watch movies and read a lot of stories, characters often get shot in the shoulder.
Hmm.
You know? So what really, and the character gets bashed in the head with a billy club. 2 hours later, he's up and running around again. No, he's probably got a concussion if he's not dead. So be aware of reality. I mean, you can stretch it sometimes. I mean, the guy gets hit once in the head, maybe not a concussion, but the seventh time in the story, he's probably got a concussion by then. So look at those kinds of things. So let's see how we doing here. All right.
The car chase ones are the worst.
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh,
this guy's been dead 5 times.
Yeah. Oh, I love the car chase scenes where you pay attention. They're going basically in like a 1-mile circle. They went past that store, they're passing that store again, they're passing that store again. And you go, did they not have enough money in the budget to get more scenes, more locales? Maybe not. Go ahead.
And sometimes your editor sends you down a rabbit hole to find some random obscure detail about when hotel doors begin to automatically lock. And it takes you a week in contacting everybody in a locksmith agency to get the expert who knows when the security regulations went in.
But it was important to the story, wasn't it, Maureen? It was. See?
Any particular
So yeah, and be prepared. If an editor spots something like that, you may be asked, when did this happen? I edited a story a while back where that takes place between World War I and World War II. World War II has not happened yet, but a character referred to World War I as World War I.
Oh.
Nobody knew there was going to be a second one, so they didn't know that was the first one. It was the Great War. So, it's a very important fact. Anybody old enough or anybody who's been in history class would know this. And it's just a very simple slip that we do that because it happened during our lifetime, we don't realize there were things before our lifetime. So we have to go back and check. Newer writers, younger writers may not have ever dialed a phone. They may not have ever, dialing a phone's a big one, have had to recurse it. So there are things you have to, where did that stop being important? I wrote a story that was published in Alfred Hitchcock's earlier this year. Anybody old enough to remember silver certificates? Well, the dollar bills changed. It stopped being silver certificates in the, well, I knew it from my stories, 70s, whatever. So when the characters find these and they realize they're silver certificates, they can tie it back to a specific event because those are they're still valid currency, but they're not the currency we use today. So, and like I had another one, $1,000 bills. They're still valid if you have one, but they have not made or distributed $1,000 bills in many, many, many years, decades. So I had a character who was being paid with a briefcase, not me, a story I edited, was being paid with a briefcase full of $1,000 bills. No. You go in a bank with a briefcase full of $1,000 bills, what are they going to do? Probably call Secret Service. Yes, there you go. So, $100 bills, believable. $20 bill, a lot more, take up more space. And also, like with money, how much space, if you give $1,000 in $20 bills, how much space does it take up? How much does it weigh? So if your character grabs a briefcase and runs off with it, maybe. But if that briefcase is filled with gold bars, they're not going to do that. You see that in movies a lot. You see people drinking. And you can tell there's nothing in the cup by the way they're holding it and the way they're drinking. So in your story, don't make those kinds of factual problems. Okay. Any questions, comments about anything so far?
Quick question. So can you share all the roles that you come across all these short stories? You're an editor by trade
Yes.
and you organize anthologies.
Yes. I've edited or co-edited more than 36 anthologies. I edited 11 issues of Black Cat Mystery Magazine, 11 of it 16 issues. I'm editor of an associate editor of Black Cat Weekly, which publishes like 10 stories a week, every week. I've been a first reader for the BoucherCon anthology. I've edited Sisters in Crime chapter anthologies. I'm one of the editors of the Malice Domestic anthology. So I published 300, 400, 500 stories that came through my fingers. And God knows how many that have been rejected because they didn't meet my standards, or they would take too much work to make publishable. So I probably read more unpublished work than published work these days, which can mess with your head.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'll blow my own horn here. Out of all those projects, stories that I've edited have won or been nominated for the Seamus, the Edgar, the Agatha, the Anthony, the McCavity, the Derringer. And they've been included in the Best Mystery Stories of the Year, Best American Mystery and Suspense, and Best American Mystery Stories. So I'm picking good stuff.
Awesome, yeah.
And are the anthologies all from the short stories that are coming into magazine publications?
No.
No.
They all vary. For example, the anthologies I edit, I put out a submission call. Sometimes it's an open call, anybody can submit,
Okay.
and sometimes it's by invitation only. Says I invite 16 writers and 15 say we're in, so I pick another one. And usually if it's invitation only, these are writers I've worked with before through usually an open call, and they've proven themselves that A, they can write well, and B, they're willing to spend a week looking up door locks. They're, so they're,
Got
they're,
it.
they're willing to they're willing to get the story. So, those are important things. These are things I look for. Now, I mean, and this doesn't even cover the obvious, good spelling, good grammar, good punctuation. You get that from all the talks. Somebody somewhere is going to tell you all about that. So,
I have a related question. So when you do an open call for an anthology, how many submissions do you get compared to what gets published?
open calls, over 100, more than
Wow.
100. And what gets published is usually in the neighborhood of 16 stories. Because usually with the anthologies that I edit myself, as opposed to being hired by a sync chapter to do whatever, it is, I have a word count. So I'm looking, it has to be between 75,000 and 80,000 words. And so it's, well, I may have more stories if they're mostly short. I may have fewer stories if some of them are long. But the target's about 16 stories.
Speaking of which, what are you defining for short story word count?
A short, this is one of those, anything can be. Generally speaking, a short story is less than 10,000 words. But most publications, or many publications, don't want stories up to that length. A good length for a short story, if you want to be published, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,500 to 5,000 words. It's long enough that you've got characterization, you've got setting, plot, etc., but short enough that it can be read in one sitting. And yes,
Oh, somebody on Zoom
Oh.
asks, where do you put out your open calls for submissions?
I tack them to a bulletin board at the HEB
The one with the grackles?
with the graphic. Normally I post them on my website. It's been a while since I did an open call. Now, if you're looking for open call, sync chapter anthologies are good. The VoucherCon anthology, Mouse Domestic anthology, those are good places. Those are always or mostly open call for, in the sync chapters, it's members of that sync chapter, but it's open to all members of that chapter. Malice Domestic has like 3 stories they pick, like their guest of honor gets in and their Toastmaster gets in and somebody else does. But all the others are from open call. Anybody else, anybody can submit. Similarly with VoucherCon, they reserve a couple of spots for like guest of honor and the rest is open call. And so there's a difference. Those tend to have, sometimes they're called first readers, sometimes they're called judges. Somebody goes through all of them and picks the stories before the editor comes on board and does the actual editing.
Great.
We go back to number 9 about being casual.
Yes.
I recently read a novel by a fine Texas writer. Grew up in San Marcos. The character lives in Lockhart. The character one day says, I went over, drove to fences, and to the skating rink and skated round and round, trying to forget her troubles. I'm a native of that little town. That rink was never open in the afternoons. I know that. To make sure I emailed my cousin, who was the grandson of the former owner, and I said, we have it open in the afternoon. He said, no, it's never open in the afternoon. Now, she skated there for sure. Friday, Saturday night, she's a bit younger than I. But she didn't skate there on the afternoons. That is a very small thing. I'm the only person from that place who knows about that rink, who has ever read that book. But it's driving me crazy.
That is what you risk as a writer. You know, sometimes maybe she misremembers, or maybe she's fudging a fact to fit the plot line of the story. And so it's one of those things, if it's not true, make it at least believably true, potentially true.
But she could have made it in the evening, it probably wouldn't have hurt the story, right?
Yeah, I would have.
Oh.
Yeah, see?
Shouldn't we write her a sternly worded letter from the chapter? If we could.
Being
accurate relative
Oh,
to language
well.
is also important.
Yeah.
Decimate, it's in use today with the idea of 80% death rate or whatever. Deci comes from 10.
Yeah.
And it originated with Roman custom of punishing a battalion that didn't function well. And so they shot every 10th person in line. Yeah. While the others watched.
Uh-oh.
So, 10% destruction.
Okay.
This is not
That's an
what
interesting.
Trump has in mind with the ending of civilization,
Yeah.
93 million people.
Words
Oh,
no longer mean what they used to mean.
well, language change I'm aware of. But another one is unique. Unique is one and only. You cannot have degrees of comparison. You can be more accurate, most accurate, but you cannot be most unique.
Yeah.
And when I see that, I instantly think superficial.
Yeah. So how do you catch a unique bird? Unique up on him. Okay. But yes, it's a very valid point. Word choices matter.
I can forgive an 18-year-old, but not a middle-aged person for being sloppy.
Okay. So what I've done, anything else on what we've covered so far? Yes, no. Okay. Unfortunately, our wonderful viewers on the internet don't have these, but I put some samples of opening paragraphs from a variety of stories. A couple are from my stories, a couple of them are from classic stories, a couple of them are from some recently published stories. And I've given you the opening paragraph, and I want to just talk about them a little bit and see what you think. The first one from 4:13 a.m., very short. It's a piece of dialogue. It says, Jamie's gone. So does it have all the elements of a good opening? Or does it have most of the elements of a good opening?
Well, it does jump into the action.
Jumps into the action.
Is 4:13?
That's the name of the
The
story.
title?
That's the title of the story.
Okay, thought maybe.
No.
It definitely makes me want to read more.
Right.
Who's Jamie? Why are they gone? Where'd they go?
So the stakes are, let's find Jamie.
Mhm.
So you won't know until your subsequent paragraphs. But that's a very short, very quick, immediate, it gets you. Jamie's, whoever Jamie is, whoever's saying it, who's ever hearing it, are both tied into Jamie in some way. And you want to know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Okay. The next one. On Friday night, our new cook breaks up a fight between a pair of warehousemen with a look. Just one look. Never seen anything like it. From a story called Retro Rhapsody. What? So stylistically, does that seem to have a voice? What are you wondering? What do you want to know next? Who's the new cook?
Well, this person seems like they're on the sidelines for sure.
The
They're
narrator
in
is,
awe.
there you go.
And I like that just one look, never seen anything like it. The line, never seen anything like it, puts you right into their head. Like it's their voice. It's not
Mhm.
just a distant observer. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, you're in this guy's head.
Yep. Okay,
Class.
It's one hell of a look.
yeah, okay. When Miss Emily Grierson died, our whole town went to her funeral. The men threw a sort of respectful affection for a fallen monument. The women mostly out of curiosity to see the inside of her house, which no one, save an old manservant, a combined gardener and cook, had seen in at least 10 years.
Mhm.
This is from a rose for Emily.
One long sentence.
One long sentence.
Mhm.
Again, do you hear or the voice? The voice is different than the first two. It's longer sentence, more words, more description of who's died and why people are interested in her death. Far more
Yeah.
formal.
Mhm.
There you go.
Massive.
But again, what do you want? What are do you know the stakes yet? Okay,
Everybody wants to see inside her house.
yes.
Yeah.
So there's something inside that house. So it's letting you know whatever's inside that house is going to be important later.
Mhm.
And if you've ever read the story, you know that's true. That is a classic you probably had to read in high school. The next one. There is so much I know now that I didn't understand during the summer of 1971. I was 13 then, soon to start ninth grade at Mason Junior High School, and I spent most days with Tommy O'Connor, the third of 7 children and the only boy, living in a 3-bedroom house across the street from the home I shared with my widowed father. The Vietnam War was winding down. Richard Nixon was running for re-election, and many teenage veterans were more than a year away from voting in the first presidential election following the July passage of the 26th Amendment.
Different things.
Intriguing. The rest of it, we care less about.
Okay.
Hmm.
Why?
Because the first one, how much I didn't know, didn't understand during the, that has a certain amount of integrity, you know, what doesn't he understand, what's going on? The rest of it about that. Okay,
Okay.
I mean, it just, to me, it didn't say anything,
Memoir.
it didn't, yeah, wow, it didn't say anything.
I
Okay.
think it establishes the character.
Establishes the character, establishes the time the story takes place, very clearly established.
Let's say the summer of 71, we already got that.
Yeah, but you lived through the summer of 71, so you know all this. Yeah, so,
Perspective, because he's looking back.
yeah, the character's looking back at something in the past. That ties in with our sample of it asks a question. So it doesn't formally ask a question, but the question is, so what happened in that summer? And why is this character telling us about it?
You had a comment over there.
Oh, sorry.
Not to be nitpicky, but I don't think Vietnam was winding down in 71.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
71, I guess it was 68 was the peak year. 68 was the peak year,
was.
they were already drawing down.
It wasn't ending, but it was drawing down, it was winding down.
I think it does set a good, it sets up the character well, but there is a little bit of like, there's a lot of things that I'm like, which pieces of this am I supposed to
There's a
retain?
lot of,
So it's kind of like a long,
lot of,
and I'm not sure which things my brain is supposed to attach to.
Okay.
there's a lot of tragic foreshadowing. Nixon was running, saying he would have peace, and then he got elected and he carpet bombed Vietnam so thoroughly that you could pass a football from one bomb crater to the other all the way down the country.
See, so one thing you're getting is different people are getting different things
Mhm.
out of this.
What intrigued me is the second to last sentence, and many teenage veterans
Yeah.
were
Oh,
more
wow.
than a year away from voting in their first presidential election.
Yeah,
How scary was that?
yeah, you're old enough to die in war, but you can't vote yet.
And unintentionally, there's a political message in that.
Right.
Okay.
Hmm.
Let's try the next one. There was a desert wind blowing that night. It was one of those hot, dry Santa Anas that come down through the mountain passes and curl your hair and make your nerves jump and your skin itch. On nights like that, every booze party ends in a fight. Meek little wives feel the edge of the carving knife and study their husbands' necks. Anything can happen. You can even get a full glass of beer at a cocktail lounge. From the Red
Southern
Line.
California.
Chandler, yeah,
I love the voice.
in California.
The only place that's got the Santa Ana winds.
Yep. It's setting. Tells you something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a dark story.
Dark
Yeah.
story.
Well,
I
I like
mean-
the humor of getting a beer at a cocktail.
It
lounge.
ends the paragraph with a touch of humor.
Mhm.
Full blessing.
Full glass of beer at a cocktail.
Hmm.
Okay. Billy the Pick and I bought tickets to see a three-legged donkey at the Blind Pig, and our tickets came with complimentary mason jars filled with moonshine. The donkey was everything the handbill said it would be, a pissed-off tripod that tried to bite anyone who came close, and the complimentary strong enough to melt your liver.
And then it's nominated for something right now.
Oh, my yes.
It's the blind pig, you know. Capitalized.
It reminds me of a saying from Deep Bible Belt country. They would vote dry as long as the deacons could stagger down to the vote, to the poll.
Because a blind pig is a type of place like a speakeasy.
Pardon?
She went into why it wasn't capitalized in the first sentence.
Yeah,
It's a
The blind
Category.
pig.
It's like saying the bar, the tavern, it's just a generic name for a generic place. Yes. You gotta be really old to know what a blind pig is.
this there.
well,
Certain
I think you needed to have uppercase letters for the name of a place.
It's not the name of the place. It's just a generic.
It's like calling it a speakeasy.
Call it a speakeasy, call it a tavern, call it a bar. It's just a blind pig.
I read cozy mysteries, so I have.
Who's the author on
It
that?
was not my.
Was it?
Yeah.
No,
They're not all you, is it? Because we're all.
No, no.
They were all like.
that last one was Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
I love the humor.
Now she's sucking up.
No,
You shouldn't have said anything, Lorraine.
it's just like, I was just like, oh, that's fun. I'd read that. Actually, I most of these, I'm like, yeah, okay.
I think it tells us a lot about the character and we get a great voice from it.
Yeah. I like the humor. I'm always a sucker for humor.
Okay. Okay, try the next one, a little bit longer. Dots of paint, nothing more, yet they captivated him. Philippe looked again at the small painting, young girl with a straw broom, the title plate said. She had a cherubic face, round and full. Rembrandt had smudged her cheeks with dirt. In the, oh God, that word. In the- Thank you. Of the background, her brown tattered dress blended with the wall behind her, the line separating building and cloth subtle and indistinct. From the palette of shadows and darkness emerged her face, like the full moon shining over the sun, saying on a dark night. Her wide eyes, brown with flecks of gold, pierced him. They seemed to see into Philippe's soul. Looking at her, he saw an angel who had flown too close to the ground. So, you get a good voice in that one, strong voice,
Sense of place.
sense of place. This is another- Not mine, but this is another story that's nominated for an award this year. This is one where you don't really know the stakes yet, but the stakes are intimately tied to what's described in that first scene. Here's another one. If you stop to think about it, this whole mess was Sister Alice's idea to begin with. Well, not the robberies themselves. That idea came straight from Nessa and Dee and me. Our part in this wasn't exactly small, and I've never denied that. It's just that when you hear Sister Alice talking about distress and anguish and all those other phrases she's been throwing around, it might not be such a terrible thing to remember. It was something she said that inspired it. Like that poster she has in her office, you know, the one that says you have to take full responsibility for the seed you plant. that voice is different from all the other examples. So what does this do? You want to know what happened? What did, gonna be funny. Sister, what did Sister Alice inspire? Does Sister Alice know what they've done? What's she gonna do with her ruler when she finds out? So these are just samples, and they are not necessarily the best pieces of work you've ever read. They're not, hopefully not the worst you've ever read. But they've each given you a step into the story. They've attracted your attention in one way or another. They've made you wonder what's happening. Some of them, the stakes are fairly clear, right? Immediately. Some of them are like, okay, I don't know what the stakes are, but it's leading the next paragraph, couple paragraphs down, perhaps. It's going to let you know what the stakes are, how important it is. Some are funnier, some are more serious, but all of them have a different voice. Those are just some samples. Now, what I would have loved is to give you samples of endings of stories that are great, but to understand the greatness of the ending of a story, you got to read the whole story. You know, because a great last line is only a great last line because it fits that story. But something to look at your last line is think of the last line of your story like the punchline of a joke. End with the impact. Don't end with, I love you, she said. She said is not the important part of that sentence. I love you. Boom, in the story. Oh, he got me, he said. No, that is, think really hard about the last line and the last words. And that helps sometimes in structuring paragraphs, structuring dialogue. A lot of times writers will bury the important stuff in the middle of the sentence, or they'll tack something at the end of the sentence that detracts from the important thing, the key point. So be conscious. Think of endings, especially like the punchline of a joke. You want that impact. Paragraphs and sentences, think of those a little bit like that. And structure your work accordingly. And the absolute best ending of a story that you'll ever get is, here's your check. When you know an editor offers to buy your story, you've done it right.
So
After a week of research.
So you think the short story market is pretty strong still? You're seeing that?
It depends on what genre you're writing in. There's been a lot of collapse of the mystery and crime short story markets. A few new ones have come up, but they haven't quite balanced out. If you're writing science fiction, fantasy, and horror, those are very strong. And if you can write in those genres, you have a better chance of earning good money for your work if you're writing publishable work. Romance, short stories. I'm not sure there are any actual paying markets other than Woman's World, although there are some non-paying markets for short romance. Literary magazines don't often pay, but there's a lot of them out there. So it really depends. And what happens if you've been around long enough, you'll go, this genre is hot right now. And as it goes down, another genre becomes hot. And as it goes down, another one becomes hot. So for a long career, you probably need some flexibility. I started out as a science fiction writer, fantasy. Was not particularly successful at it. And along the line, started writing mystery, suspense, crime fiction, and sold a lot more of it. Started writing a lot of women's fiction, sold a lot of that. Still, every once in a while, I'll sell a science fiction story, but not very much.
And how do you keep track of that? Is there a marketplace that you regularly check?
I just use Google. Use Google, search for calls for submission, anthologies, call for submission, science fiction, call for submission, mystery. If you do that roughly once a week, I have found markets that don't show up on the websites that purport to tell you all about all the markets. There are a whole lot of markets that never show up there. You just have to take the time and learn to use your search engine, Google or Yahoo or whatever you use to search these days, is go out and find them. And what's great is if you do that, you will find markets that other writers aren't finding because they're stuck using these aggregate sites.
Writer's Digest used to.
Right, yeah, Writer's Digest used to be pretty good, but the annual, it's a year out of date by the time it's in your hands, but it's a starting point. What I used to do generations ago is walk into a bookstore or any place that had a magazine rack, stand in front of it and open magazines and look for fiction. And I found fiction in magazines that do not tell you that they publish fiction. Or they don't put in their market guidelines, or they didn't show up in Writer's Digest. You only knew about it because you opened the magazine and looked at it. I do a similar thing with Google as I go out and I look.
How long have you been in the business?
I wrote my first professionally published story when I was 17. It was published when I was 21, and I'm now,
So how
I'm
many
68.
cycles have you seen of mystery and crime come in and out in those years?
This is probably the second, maybe the third downturn.
Okay.
So, yeah.
If you go to the Short Fiction Society group, they keep a document of markets and anthologies that are open, and
Where is that?
Short Mystery Fiction Society.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't.
the
Short,
But what about it?
the Short Mystery Fiction Society, if you write short mystery fiction, it's a free group to join. It's basically an IO group, and they award the Derringers every year. But they keep a market list, they update fairly regularly, of anthologies, magazines, websites, et cetera, specifically that publish short crime fiction, mystery fiction, thriller fiction. And it's pretty good. It still misses stuff that you can find on your own using Google.
And have you written a full-length novel as well?
I've had 5 novels published, I think. But I switched to short stories many, many years ago because I was earning more money writing short stories than I was from the novels. And I figured, well, that's a waste of time. And unfortunately, there's not as much money in short stories these days, but I stick with short stories since almost every short story I write sells. My novels, I've sold every novel I've finished, but that was years and years and years ago.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you look for a call for submissions before you start writing a story, or do you write the story and then you look for calls for submission?
At the beginning of my career, I would write and then I would try to find a place to send it. Try to write the best story I could.
Mhm.
As I've gotten older and more experienced, I don't often look for markets unless I have a story that didn't sell, because I get invited to a lot of things.
Mhm.
The editor says, Michael, will you write me a story based on the songs of the Beatles, or based on songs of Billy Joel, or based on this?
Mhm.
I say, yeah, I'll write that. So a lot of what I'm writing now is by invitation.
Mhm.
And then every once in a while, I still don't make the cut. And so I have a story that I need to find another market for. Or there are occasionally I look at the calls for submissions just to see, sometimes something really piques my mind. Like the one story Under the Proctor Street Bridge. It was written for a call for submission for stories set in Washington for the Left Coast Crime a couple of years ago. Did not make the cut, was wound up published in an anthology earlier this year about historical mysteries. Mine took place more recently than any other story in it. It just made the cut of being historical.
Yeah.
71's history. Can you believe it? I lived through that.
Just coming in.
Yeah.
Vietnam.
So, but
The Proctor Street Bridge story was published in Left Coast.
no, it was, I wrote it for the Left Coast Crime Open Call Anthology, but they rejected it. And it was published in, I can't remember the name, I thought Time After Time. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's on my website. And there's a link. So that's it. When I'm looking for calls for submission, and I do that sometimes because I don't have any invitations. I want to write. I've got some ideas. I'll look for a call and see, does something here spark the idea? And the nice thing about using those call for submissions is sometimes I don't finish the story in time, but down the line, it's still a good idea. It winds up being a finished story and it winds up selling. I've sold a couple stories to Alfred Hitchcock that started by seeing a submission call for an anthology, but I didn't finish the story in time to submit it. And there's been some others like that. But yeah, those can be good prompts, even if you ultimately don't submit to the anthology. Because, you sit around, sometimes you have a brilliant idea, it just comes to you, God, please give me a brilliant idea. And you have one, you write a story. And sometimes you want to write and you just have an idea. So by reading calls for submission, you go, oh, story about a dwarf, a Dalmatian, 3 pickup trucks, and a guy named Bubba. I can write that.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it is they're calling for, you go, oh, I think I can do something with that concept or with that idea or that whatever.
I actually had an idea that was based on a submission for the Malice Anthology 9 years ago. And the idea just came to me from the walk from where I saw the thing to the elevator. But it was that year's anthology, which was Murder Most Conventional. And I had this entire idea. And I was like, too bad I didn't see that a year ago. The book's already out. 9 years later, the call was Murder Most Senior. And my idea fit it perfectly because it involved a senior person. And so anyway, yeah, that was one that was 9 years in the making. But, you know, I love that. Like I was telling Noreen before the meeting, like it had an opportunity to bake for 9 years.
Yeah.
So it was really easy to write.
Yeah.
But if you're in an anthology and it's like we have the rights for a year, like say you were in a chapter anthology that no one read. Are people, I mean, I know you can pitch things that have already been published to some people, but is there kind of like, that's already been published, or is it kind of like, yeah, that was not talking about the Malice Anthology, just an old chapter anthology story that, you know, it has like 3 Amazon reviews from, you know.
You got
Amazon.
3? Awesome.
I don't need to brag.
Yeah. Wow. There are some publications that will take reprint rights. And you just have to look for, just like you're looking for places for news stories, you look for places for reprints. I've sold many reprints over the years. I've had some stories sell 3 and 4 times.
Oh, cool.
So
So it's not like well, we look at it, but you know.
yeah,
that's
it
desirable.
doesn't fit their needs. Is it right for whatever? Do we have oh. But yeah, you look for places that will look at reprints just like they're looking for markets for new stuff.
And you're saying they value it the same if that fits their need. Oh.
I know.
Let's put it this way. Usually,
That was actually the subtext of my question.
usually a reprint will get you less money than an original. So they'll pay $50 for a new story and 25 for a reprint.
It's like for maybe more than 6 people to read it. That'd be neat.
There's a question, do you ever submit to a publication that isn't calling for submissions just because you like it and you think that they would like your story?
Occasionally, yes. But any magazine that publishes it on a regular basis, whether they have a formal call for submissions or not, like Hitchcock and Queen don't put out formal calls for submission.
Right.
If you want to get published in them, you got to figure out how to send to them, and you send it to them.
Yeah.
And there are many magazines like that. And you take your shot. The worst they can do is say no, and you've probably heard that before if you're a writer. So
If it's Hitchcock, then you wait 450 days to be told no.
They do what?
they're slow to respond, but
Hitchcock takes currently.
about 14 months
Oh,
to
wow.
respond.
Wow. That's,
There's software that you use also to keep track of what you've submitted,
Some people use software.
you know.
I'm very old school. I don't even do that. I have file folders. Because I started before all this stuff existed, so I've got a system. Write the story, put it in a file folder, and the file folder moves in the cabinet. Submit it, it's not submitted, it's accepted, goes here, goes there, whatever.
wow.
So it's,
I have a spreadsheet.
yeah, spreadsheet.
I'm right.
There are programs. And you, so. We kind of veered away from the original topics, but any last comments or what?
Defense of
what about your-
cozies,
Oh, go ahead.
defense of cozies.
Yeah.
I like the humor.
Mhm.
I like the cultural background. I like the setting. I like the study of characters. And one of my favorite is Alexander McCall Smith of
Mm.
Scotland,
Yeah.
born in Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
Scottish parents. And if I make a trip to Scotland, I'm gonna go through all my underlines in his Scottish works first.
Yeah, there is no genre or subgenre that is inherently better or worse than any other. They all have their readers, they all have their tropes, they all have their stylistic quirks. And what you like and don't like is unique to you. And some writers are really good at writing cozy, some are really good at writing private eye, some are really good at writing horror stories. A few writers can write a lot of different things. So, I mean, so whatever you love to read and whatever you love to write is good. A secondary corollary to that is sometimes what you're really good at writing isn't necessarily what you thought you were going to write. Goes back to how I began with science fiction and fantasy. I got a lot of rejections and a couple of small sales. And after an editor's comment, I wrote my first mystery. He bought it, and then he bought my second one, and then my third one sold to a mystery magazine. And go, was I writing in the wrong genre? I loved science fiction. I was going to be Robert Heinlein or Isaac Asimov. Turns out, no, not. But so be willing to try other things. If you're writing hard boiled and it's not selling, try writing a cozy. If you're writing cozies and it's not selling, try writing a private eye story. If you're writing private eye stories and they're not selling, try a children's story. Try lots of things. And you may find that what you're really good at isn't necessarily what you started out to be. But you're still a writer.
I think that's why the short stories intrigue me so much, because I want to write in every genre, but with novels, there's not time,
Yeah.
you know, so it's kind of a way to play, like, I'm a cozy writer, but I would totally write a horror, you know, like, but I'm not gonna go write a whole horror novel.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a way to scratch the itch.
I agree with you. I mean, it seems, with your presentation, it makes me, really curious to see if it's possible to sit down and write a short story in a completely different genre than one I.
Yeah,
toiling
It takes a whole lot less time than a full novel. For me, at least, I'm very slow with novels.
The word horror has come up several times, so I have to ask. Define horror. When you go and try to pick categories on Amazon, you write a ghost story, they will give you horror as your overall category. So I don't know, is horror, when I think of horror, I think of Stephen King.
Right. A ghost story is
Stephen
not,
King.
it's not necessarily a horror story. I've sold 2 ghost stories to Alfred Hitchcock's. They're not horror.
Paranormal.
Paranormal, they've got
Yeah.
ghosts in them,
Yeah.
supernatural.
It's very difficult to.
Yeah,
find
horror is this is
categories,
all encompassing, like saying mystery, but under the mystery umbrella are cozies and private eye and hard boiled and all that. Under the horror umbrella, there's the splatter punk where you get all the violence on stage. There's the very quiet horror where it's the creaking of the stairs and the wind whistling through the trees. There's all kinds of horror. And what one interesting thing, non-supernatural horror and dark crime fiction are the same thing. Just where did you submit it and who published it?
Wow.
So you may, if you write dark crime fiction, it might qualify as non-supernatural horror.
I have a question. A friend of mine had said, and I'm not sure, I feel like it might have been from one of your talks somewhere. And so if you, maybe you're the one who said this, or maybe it was someone else, but
It was good, I said it.
So she'd said that she'd heard that, like, for example, right after there's like a Malice anthology and it's maybe Murder Most Senior, that right after
me.
people get rejected, that you get a flood of people going, oh, here's something that fits this specific theme of this anthology that I was just rejected for. And that, maybe don't submit it right after when you're getting that flood of people writing about this. Any other insight or tips like that one? Because I thought that was a great, like, oh, really smart. Don't send a convention story right after the convention when it got rejected.
Think that's a good thing. For example, when I was editing Black Cat Mystery Magazine, Malice had Mystery Most Theatrical. They announced their acceptances, which means they also sent out the rejections. And within a few days, my inbox was flooded theatrical themed mystery stories. I knew where they were all
Yeah.
rejected from. So my first thought is, why am I looking at all these rejections? So
Yes.
even if they're great stories, first off, I'm thinking, well, these are rejected stories.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I'm not doing the magazine was not themed for theatrical stories. I bought, I think, one of them out of 30 or 40 that I got. The one was good enough to stand out above the others. I don't know, why didn't it make the cut for the anthology? I don't know, but I bought one. So you don't want to flood Hitchcock or Queen or some other publication. So all the rejections from the Malice anthology went out recently. I'd sit on it for 6 months or a year before I sent my story out. So it's not in that tidal wave of similar stories. The other thing, and I'm not quite sure if it still holds true, but it used to be a lot of editors would get stories back in the days of mail about a week after the holidays. Because writers would be home at Christmas or home at Thanksgiving, and they would have time, because most writers had full-time jobs. They'd have a weekend or 3 days, and they'd write, and they'd finish the story and send it out. About a week later, the inboxes or the slush piles of the magazine editors were filled with stories. So that was a lousy time to submit, because now, instead of being the best out of the 10 that came in that week, you might be a good one out of 40 or 50 that showed it. So, but with email, I don't know if that still holds true.
Yeah, is there like a slow season? One time a travel writing editor told me, like, she was saying like, oh, like at this time of year, we have very few submissions, and at this time of year, we're flooded with submissions, like anything with the timing that's.
Well, a couple things to keep in mind, if you're writing holiday stories. You don't send a Christmas story in December. It takes time. It has to get through the slush pile, it has to be decided on, has to be bought and contracted and edited and assigned for publication. So every magazine's a little bit different, but the rule used to be, if you were writing a Christmas story, you submitted it midsummer. If you're writing a summer story, you submitted it Christmas. And I used to have my calendar set up so that I knew I'm sitting at home on Christmas Day and I'm writing, I'm going, oh, it's a blazing hot summer here in Kalamazoo or whatever. So you had to think opposite the season. I don't know how valid it is now. Like with Hitchcock, it pretty much doesn't matter when you send it, it's still going to be 14 months. But if they buy it, they're going to hold it for the season. And there's also look at holiday stories as a possibility. It's not quite so evident with Queen and Hitchcock, but I used to write for a group of magazines. They loved holiday stories. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, New Year's Day, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. I found holidays I didn't even know existed and wrote stories about them. And that's a way you can tie things in.
There's another question on Zoom. It says, how long does it take you to write a short story from idea to polished enough to submit?
There is no real good answer. I've written stories where I've sat down and typed until I was done and sent it right away and sold them. And I've had stories that have taken years. The story from Hitchcock that was published earlier this year called Glass Beach. It took, I don't know, a couple of years to write the story. Then Linda sent it back. She had 2 things she didn't like. She rejected it and told me 2 things she didn't like about it. It took me another couple of, she didn't say she'd look at it again, but her reasons for rejecting were so specific. I go, can I solve those? It took another couple of years to figure out how to solve those problems and send it to her. And I asked her if she'd reread it. She did, and she bought it. So it's not how quickly you write a story. It's how many stories you write. So at any given time, I've got a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen stories in progress. And if none of them call to me, and sometimes there's a story, you have a deadline, you have to finish this for such and so anthology. Or you have a story that, oh my God, it grabs me. I know how this goes. And you sit down and pound it out. But sometimes you don't have that, but you have time to write. So what I do is I open up the file. I open up the first story file. Oh, I know the next sentence. That's all I know. Or I open up and go, ooh, I think I can figure out the plot, and I'll put notes about plotting, or I'll put ideas, I'll put things in the story. And at some point, ultimately, I will have enough there to go, I know how this thing ends, and I wrap it up and submit it. So in that way, there's no writer's block. Writer's block is you get stuck. You only have one idea, you have one story, and you don't know what to do with it, and you obsess over it, and you're stopped cold. But if you can stop and pivot to another story, you're constantly producing. And over time, you will constantly finish and constantly submit.
I like that.
I know.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That sounds
Do you
great.
have any experience with publishing them yourself? You know, Amazon has short read categories. For
I've published some stuff myself. Mostly it's been reprints, stuff that's already been bought and paid for. And I have a few things under a pseudonym that they're just out there. I don't really do much with them. So Amazon sends me a couple of bucks every month. Like, ooh, I can buy half a cheeseburger now.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't have bought the half cheeseburger. Yeah,
To a whole dinner.
yeah.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Any more Zoom questions?
Last chance for Zoom questions.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I do have some books for sale for those of you who are here. Sorry, can't get your money, Zoom people. My wife will gladly take your money if you want some. And the drawing, who's gonna? Hey. Oh.
Thank you so much for driving down. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And now we know who to call when we're ready to do our,
Where are you from?
I'm from Waco, or just outside Waco. My business card, feel free to take one. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to ask. I'm not looking for new best friends, but if you have a question you didn't remember or didn't think to ask it,
so when I saw you speak,
what I do now, yeah.
sorry, when I saw you speak, I think it was the Rocky Mountain chapter. I don't know how my microphone had been turned off, but then somehow my cat wandered into the room and my microphone was no longer turned off. And I blurted, Fletch, and without missing a beat, Michael just was like, hi, Fletch. Anyway. I don't know if you remember that, but I.
Okay. And the winner of Murder Neat, co-edited with Barb Goffman, won a Derringer Award and was shortlisted for an Anthony Award. The winner is Leah Little.
There we go.
There you go.
Sayers Anthology.
Yeah.
That's like one word, Sooth.
Yeah, it's a group, it's a group of writers. We do a group blog. And so all the,
So-
I knew when he was so cool about me interrupting his presentation by yelling, hi, Fletch.
Do any of your books over there have Bucker Street?
no,
I like that.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for people
Uh,
on Zoom also.
did you-
And we have
go on
recorded
my
it.
website and you can look it up and it'll tell you the name of the book. It's currently for sale on Amazon and Barnes and
Yeah.
Noble.
Time after time.
We've recorded this
think
and I'm
it's
going to
time
put it on the library's
Look,
YouTube
okay.
page this week. All right.
Okay.
So if you missed any of it, it'll be up on the library's YouTube page. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. See you later. Bye-bye.
But it can wait.
Is it?
I don't remember.
Good.